Tokyo, March 1943. Captain Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's most decorated fighter aces with 64 confirmed victories, stands in the assembly hall of the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries plant in Nagoya. He has been pulled from combat operations in the South Pacific for what the Imperial Japanese Navy calls an inspection tour of home production facilities. The official purpose: boost morale among factory workers by showing them a real war hero. The unofficial purpose: give combat pilots a reality check on how many replacement aircraft they can expect. Sakai walks slowly down the factory floor, his boots echoing on concrete still damp from the morning cleaning. The hall is large by Japanese standards, perhaps 200 meters long, with high ceilings supported by steel trusses. Natural light filters through windows that will later be painted black for air raid precautions. But what strikes Sakai immediately is not the size of the facility. It is how empty it feels. He counts the aircraft under construction. 1, 2, 3. He continues walking. 7, 9, 12. At the far end of the building, he finds 3 more in final assembly. 15 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters in various stages of completion. 15 aircraft in a factory that represents one of Japan's primary production facilities for the most important fighter in the Imperial Navy. The plant manager, a nervous man in his 50s wearing a suit that has seen better days, explains that they complete approximately 15 to 18 Zeros per month, on a good month. Perhaps 20. He says this with evident pride, as if 20 aircraft represents a significant achievement. Sakai, who has watched dozens of Zeros shot down over Guadalcanal, who knows that a single bad day of combat can cost the Navy 10 or 12 fighters, says nothing. He simply nods and moves on to the next station. What Sakai does not know, what no one in that factory knows, what Japanese intelligence is only beginning to understand, is that at this exact moment, half a world away in Michigan, Henry Ford's Willow Run plant is completing one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes, not per month, per hour. The mathematics are so lopsided, the industrial disparity so vast, that even if someone had explained it to the officers touring the Mitsubishi plant that day, they would have dismissed it as American propaganda. But the numbers are real, and they are about to reshape the entire Pacific War through the most brutal arithmetic imaginable. Japan is building fighters one at a time using methods that would have been familiar to craftsmen in 1920. America is building bombers on an assembly line using methods that are redefining what industrial production means. This is the story of how Japan's finest aircraft, designed by brilliant engineers and flown by superbly trained pilots, was overwhelmed not by superior technology, but by superior factories. How a nation that prided itself on warrior spirit and technical excellence lost the air war to a nation that prided itself on mass production and industrial efficiency, and how Japanese officers, touring their own production facilities in 1943 and 44, slowly came to understand that they were not losing the war in the sky. They had already lost it in the factory. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero enters service in July 1940, and for the first 2 years of the Pacific War, it is the most feared fighter aircraft in the region. The name Zero comes from the Japanese year 2600, the year of its introduction according to the Japanese calendar. Allied pilots simply call it the Zero, and they learn very quickly to respect it. The Zero is a marvel of engineering optimization. Its designer, Jiro Horikoshi, faces an impossible challenge. The Imperial Japanese Navy demands a carrier-based fighter with exceptional range, superior maneuverability, heavy armament, and high speed. These requirements are contradictory. Range requires fuel, which means weight. Maneuverability requires lightweight. Heavy armament requires structure, which means more weight. High speed requires powerful engines, which Japan does not have in abundance. Horikoshi's solution is elegant and ultimately fatal. He strips away everything non-essential. The Zero has no armor plating for the pilot, no self-sealing fuel tanks, minimal structural reinforcement. The airframe is built from a special aluminum alloy that is strong but light, and every component is designed to minimize weight The result is an aircraft that weighs just 1,680 kilograms empty, can fly over 3,000 kilometers, and can turn inside any fighter the Allies can field in 1941 and 42. In the hands of experienced pilots, the Zero is devastating. At Pearl Harbor, Zeros provide fighter cover for the attacking bombers and sweep aside the few American fighters that manage to get airborne. Over the Philippines, Zeros destroy the American Far East Air Force on the ground and in the air. In the Dutch East Indies, over Singapore, across the South Pacific, the Zero establishes air superiority so complete that Allied pilots begin to believe the aircraft is invincible. But the Zero's advantages come with a price that will become apparent only later. The lack of armor means that a single burst from heavy machine guns can kill the pilot or ignite the unprotected fuel tanks. The lightweight structure means that high-speed dives risk structural failure. And most critically, the Zero is difficult and time-consuming to build. Each aircraft requires thousands of man-hours of skilled labor. Components must be hand-fitted. Tolerances are tight. There are no shortcuts. At Mitsubishi's Nagoya plant, Zero production in 1941 averages about 60 aircraft per month across all production lines. This seems adequate when the war begins. Japan has approximately 400 Zeros in service, and the Navy believes the war will be short. 6 months of victories, then a negotiated peace that leaves Japan in control of the resource-rich territories it has seized. Under this assumption, 60 Zeros per month is sufficient to cover losses and gradually expand the fighter force. But the assumption is wrong. The war does not end in 6 months. American production does not collapse. Allied resistance does not crumble. Instead, the Pacific War becomes a grinding campaign of attrition, and attrition is exactly the kind of war Japan cannot afford to fight. By early 1943, when Captain Sakai tours the Nagoya plant, the situation is deteriorating. Experienced pilots are being killed faster than they can be replaced. Aircraft losses are mounting, and production, despite heroic efforts by factory workers, cannot keep pace with combat losses. The 15 Zeros that Sakai sees under construction represent perhaps 3 days of losses across all combat theaters. The plant is running at maximum capacity, workers are pulling double shifts, and it is not nearly enough. The problem is not effort. Japanese factory workers are dedicated, skilled, and work under conditions that would be intolerable in American plants. Many are putting in 12 or 14-hour days, 6 or 7 days per week. The problem is not design. The Zero, for all its vulnerabilities, remains an effective fighter in the hands of a skilled pilot. The problem is not material shortage. Not yet. Japan still has access to aluminum and other strategic materials from conquered territories. The problem is methodology. Japan is building Zeros the way a watchmaker builds watches. Each aircraft is a precision instrument, carefully assembled by skilled craftsmen who understand every rivet and every joint. This approach produces excellent aircraft, but it produces them slowly. America, meanwhile, is building bombers the way Ford builds cars, standardized components, assembly line production, unskilled workers performing simple repetitive tasks. This approach produces adequate aircraft, but it produces them in overwhelming numbers. The contrast becomes apparent in the production figures. In 1943, all of Japan's aircraft manufacturers combined produce approximately 16,600 aircraft of all types. This includes fighters, bombers, reconnaissance planes, and trainers. Of these, approximately 2,800 are Zero fighters. The Mitsubishi plant that Captain Sakai visits contributes perhaps 200 of these Zeros over the course of the year. Meanwhile, in 1943, American factories produce 85,800 aircraft. This is more than 5 times Japanese production. And within this total, American plants produce 18,482 B-24 Liberator bombers. This single aircraft type, produced in a single year, exceeds the total number of all fighters Japan will produce over the entire course of the war. The B-24 Liberator is everything the Zero is not. It is large, weighing 17,237 kilograms empty. It is heavy, built from thick aluminum plate with redundant systems and substantial defensive armament. It is complex, powered by 4 engines and requiring a crew of 10. And yet, paradoxically, it is faster to build than the lightweight, simple Zero. The secret lies in how it is built. The B-24 is designed from the beginning for mass production. Components are standardized. Parts are interchangeable between aircraft built in different factories. The fuselage comes together from large, prefabricated sections. Engines arrive as complete units from specialized suppliers. Electrical systems are plug-and-play modules. The entire aircraft is designed so that relatively unskilled workers, given a few weeks of training, can assemble it correctly. Henry Ford's Willow Run plant in Michigan represents the culmination of this approach. The main assembly building is over 1 kilometer long and covers 67 acres under one roof. It is the largest room in the world when it opens. Inside, a moving assembly line carries B-24 fuselages through 165 separate workstations. At each station, a team performs a specific task: installing hydraulic lines, mounting gun turrets, wiring the electrical system, fitting the flight controls. The line moves slowly, about 1 meter every 6 minutes, but it never stops. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The line advances. Workers come in 3 shifts. When one team clocks out, another clocks in and picks up exactly where the previous shift left off. The work is repetitive, often monotonous, but it is effective. By the spring of 1943, Willow Run is completing 1 B-24 every 63 minutes. By the end of 1943, production will reach 1 bomber every hour. If you were to place Captain Sakai in the Willow Run plant on the same day he visits the Mitsubishi facility, the contrast would be almost incomprehensible. The Mitsubishi plant has 15 Zeros under construction, representing nearly 1 month of production. The Willow Run plant has dozens of B-24s under construction at any given moment, representing about 3 days of production. The Mitsubishi plant employs perhaps 2,000 workers. Willow Run employs 42,000 workers, many of them women with no prior industrial experience. But Captain Sakai is not at Willow Run. He is in Nagoya, watching skilled craftsmen hand-fit aluminum panels onto a Zero's fuselage. And he does not know that the war has already been decided by industrial capacity that his side cannot match. He does not know that while he stands in this factory, American shipyards are launching merchant vessels faster than Japanese submarines can sink them. He does not know that American aircraft plants are producing fighters and bombers in quantities that will soon darken the skies over Japan itself. What he does know, with the instinct of a combat pilot who has seen too many friends die, is that 15 Zeros per month is not enough, not nearly enough. Lieutenant Commander Minoru Genda, one of the principal planners of the Pearl Harbor attack and a naval aviation officer of exceptional insight, visits the same Mitsubishi plant 4 months after Captain Sakai's tour. It is July 1943. The Battle of Midway is 13 months in the past. Guadalcanal has been lost. The tide of the Pacific War is turning, and Genda has been tasked with assessing Japan's ability to rebuild its carrier air groups. He carries a notebook filled with figures. Before the war, the combined carrier air groups of the Imperial Japanese Navy operated approximately 400 frontline aircraft, with perhaps 200 Zeros among them. These aircraft were flown by superbly trained pilots, many with combat experience in China, all with hundreds of flight hours. This force attacked Pearl Harbor, devastated the American Pacific Fleet, and established Japanese dominance across the Pacific. By July 1943, these numbers have collapsed. Of the original 400 carrier aircraft, perhaps 30 remain in service. The rest have been lost in combat, accidents, or simple mechanical failure. Of the original pilots, roughly 3/4 are dead or permanently disabled, and replacement production has barely kept pace with losses, let alone expanded the force. Genda walks through the Mitsubishi plant with a different eye than Captain Sakai. He's not a combat pilot looking for emotional reassurance. He's a staff officer looking for cold facts. How many aircraft can this plant produce per month? What are the bottlenecks? Can production be expanded? The answers he receives are not encouraging. The plant manager, the same nervous man who showed Captain Sakai around months earlier, explains the challenges. Skilled workers are being drafted into the army. Those who remain are exhausted from constant overtime. Aluminum supply is adequate for now, but may become constrained as shipping from the southern resource area grows more dangerous. Machine tools are wearing out, and replacements must be imported or manufactured domestically with long lead times. Quality control is paramount, the manager emphasizes, and quality control requires time. Gender does the mathematics in his notebook. 15 zeros per month from this plant, perhaps 40 per month from all Mitsubishi facilities combined. Another 30 per month from Nakajima, which also builds zeros under license. 70 zeros per month total, if everything goes perfectly. Call it 60 per month as a realistic estimate, accounting for bottlenecks and supply issues. 60 zeros per month translates to 720 per year. This is approximately double the number of zeros currently in frontline service. On the surface, this seems adequate, but Gender knows the numbers are deceiving. Combat losses in the South Pacific are running at roughly 50 to 70 zeros per month. Training accidents and mechanical failures add another 10 to 15 losses. The Navy is not expanding, it is barely maintaining current strength, and even maintaining current strength requires pilots, which is proving even harder than producing aircraft. Before the war, Zero pilots received approximately 400 hours of flight training before their first combat deployment. This extensive training produced pilots of exceptional skill, capable of exploiting the Zero's maneuverability to maximum advantage. But by mid-1943, training has been cut to 200 hours or less. Fuel shortages, aircraft shortages, and the urgent need for replacements have forced a reduction in training time. The result is predictable. New pilots arrive at combat units with minimal experience and are often shot down within their first few missions. Gender recognizes the death spiral. Inadequate production leads to inadequate training, which leads to higher combat losses, which requires more production to replace losses, which leaves fewer aircraft for training. Japan is consuming its air power faster than it can regenerate it, and the Americans, from all intelligence reports, are expanding their air power at a rate that seems impossible. Before leaving the plant, Gender asks the manager a hypothetical question. If the Navy provided unlimited resources, unlimited labor, and removed all bureaucratic constraints, how many Zeros could this plant produce per month? The manager considers carefully. Perhaps 30, he says. Maybe 35, in an absolute best case. The physical space is limited. The tooling is limited. Even with more workers, there are only so many aircraft you can build simultaneously in the available area. Gender thanks him and departs. In his notebook, he writes a single sentence. We cannot win an industrial war. This assessment will not appear in his official report. Such defeatism is dangerous, possibly treasonous. But Gender knows it is true. Japan entered the war believing that superior training, superior tactics, and superior morale could overcome material disadvantages. The Zero seemed to prove this belief correct in 1941 and 42. But by mid-1943, American pilots have learned to counter the Zero's strengths, and American industry is burying Japanese air power under sheer weight of numbers. At the same moment, Gender tours the Mitsubishi plant. American factories are in the process of a production miracle that will define the Pacific War. In July 1943 alone, American aircraft plants produced 7,165 military aircraft. This single month of American production exceeds Japan's total production for any quarter of 1943. The B-24 production is particularly staggering. 5 different American plants are building B-24s simultaneously. Willow Run in Michigan, Consolidated in San Diego, Douglas in Tulsa, North American in Dallas, and Ford in Detroit. These plants operate around the clock, 3 shifts per day, producing bombers with assembly line efficiency. In July 1943, they combined to produce 1,091 B-24 Liberators. This represents more than one B-24 completed every hour, accounting for all 5 plants. To understand the disparity, consider this. The Mitsubishi plant that produces 15 Zeros per month has approximately 2,000 workers, dedicating roughly 160,000 man-hours per month to Zero production. This translates to approximately 10,600 man-hours per Zero. The Willow Run plant, producing 500 B-24s per month with 42,000 workers, dedicating roughly 6,700,000 man-hours, requires approximately 13,400 man-hours per B-24. The B-24 is vastly more complex than the Zero. It is 6 times heavier, has 4 engines instead of 1, carries a crew of 10 instead of 1, and includes far more systems and equipment, yet it requires only 26% more man-hours to build. This apparent paradox is explained by efficiency. The American assembly line approach, with specialized workers performing repetitive tasks, standardized components requiring no hand-fitting, and prefabricated subassemblies, achieves productivity that Japanese craft-based production cannot match. Moreover, the B-24 is better protected, longer-ranged, and carries a bomb load that can sink ships or destroy factories. A single B-24 can deliver 2,700 kilograms of bombs over a range of 3,200 kilometers. 20 B-24s, representing less than 1 day of production at Willow Run, can strike with the destructive power equivalent to a naval bombardment. 500 B-24s per month, Willow Run's production rate by late 1943 represents strategic bombing capability that can systematically destroy an industrial economy. Japan has no counter to this. The Imperial Japanese Army operates some heavy bombers, primarily the Mitsubishi G4M, but production rates are minuscule compared to American output. In all of 1943, Japan produces approximately 1,500 medium and heavy bombers of all types combined. The United States produces 29,855 bombers in the same period, a 20-to-1 production ratio. When American intelligence officers interrogate captured Japanese pilots and naval personnel in late 1943 and early 1944, a common theme emerges. The prisoners express shock not at American technological sophistication, but at American quantity. One captured Zero pilot, shot down near Rabaul and recovered by American forces, tells his interrogators, "We knew you had many planes. We did not know you had endless planes." Endless is not an exaggeration from his perspective. Every convoy to forward bases brings more American aircraft. Every carrier strike includes dozens of fighters and bombers. Every island airfield that falls to American forces is quickly repaired and filled with American planes. From the perspective of a Japanese pilot flying a Zero, it seems that for every American aircraft shot down, 2 more appear. The mathematics of attrition, which Japan hoped would work in its favor through superior training and tactics, has reversed. Now Japan is being bled white by attrition, unable to replace losses as quickly as they occur. The strategic implications of this production disparity become brutally apparent in the campaign for the Marshall Islands in early 1944. The United States launches Operation Flintlock, an amphibious assault on Kwajalein Atoll, supported by overwhelming airpower. The carrier task force includes 12 aircraft carriers operating over 600 aircraft. Japanese defenders on Kwajalein have perhaps 20 operational aircraft, mostly Zeros, based on the atoll's airfield. The air battle, such as it is, lasts less than 3 hours. American fighters sweep over the atoll in waves, destroying Japanese aircraft on the ground and in the air. By the end of the first day, Japanese air power in the Marshalls has been effectively eliminated. American losses, 7 aircraft. Japanese losses, all of them. The assault proceeds with American ground forces enjoying complete air superiority. Japanese positions are bombed and strafed continuously. Supply convoys cannot reach the defenders. Reinforcement is impossible. The atoll falls within a week. This pattern repeats across the Pacific throughout 1944. At Truk, Japan's major naval base in the Caroline Islands, A two-day American carrier raid in February destroys 270 aircraft, most of them on the ground. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June, Japanese carrier aircraft attack the American fleet in what is intended as a decisive engagement. The result is catastrophic for Japan. American fighters, including the new F-6F Hellcat, specifically designed to counter the Zero, shoot down more than 300 Japanese aircraft in a single day while losing only 29 of their own. American pilots call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The problem for Japan is not that individual Zero pilots lack skill or courage. Many remain highly capable. The problem is that there are too few of them. They fly aircraft that are increasingly outmatched by newer American fighters, and when they are shot down, they cannot be adequately replaced. American pilots, by contrast, arrive in theater with extensive training, fly aircraft with armor protection and self-sealing, fuel tanks, and operate as part of a vast industrial system that can absorb losses and continue expanding. By the summer of 1944, the production disparity has become so extreme that Japanese military planners begin to understand they are not fighting a conventional war, they are fighting an industrial apocalypse. In June 1944, a delegation of Imperial Japanese Navy officers conducts another tour of the Mitsubishi Nagoya plant. The purpose of this tour is different from previous visits. The Navy is considering a desperate proposal to convert the Zero into a kamikaze aircraft, a one-way weapon designed to crash into American ships. The officers walk through the same factory floor that Captain Sakai and Lieutenant Commander Genda visited. The scene has changed little. Perhaps 16 or 17 Zeros are under construction, representing a slight increase in production, but nothing transformative. The plant manager explains that they have implemented efficiency improvements, streamlined some processes, but fundamental constraints remain. Skilled labor is increasingly scarce as more workers are drafted. Some materials are harder to obtain, as American submarines interdict shipping routes. Machine tools are wearing out. Despite everyone's best efforts, production remains around 70 to 80 Zeros per month across all Mitsubishi facilities. One of the visiting officers, a commander whose name is redacted from surviving records, asks a question that the plant manager finds difficult to answer. The Americans, the commander says, are reported to be producing hundreds of aircraft per week. Is this possible? Could any industrial system actually achieve such production rates? The plant manager, who has spent his entire career in aircraft manufacturing, considers the question carefully. He has seen intelligence reports, he has heard the rumors, but the numbers seem divorced from reality. His plant, one of Japan's most important aviation facilities, produces 15 to 20 Zeros per month using methods refined over years of experience. The idea that American plants could be producing 50 or 100 aircraft per week seems to violate basic principles of manufacturing. Aircraft are complex machines, he explains. They require precision assembly, skilled workers, quality control. There are limits to how fast you can build an airplane, regardless of resources. The commander persists. What if the Americans have found a way to eliminate the need for skilled assembly? What if they have broken the aircraft into sub-assemblies that can be built separately by unskilled workers and then joined together? What if they treat aircraft production like automobile production? The plant manager shakes his head. Impossible, he says. An aircraft is not an automobile. The tolerances are tighter. The systems are more complex. The safety requirements are more stringent. You cannot simply train a farmer or a housewife in a few weeks and expect them to build a fighter or a bomber. It requires years of experience, an understanding of how the systems interact, a craftsman's sense of what is correct. This belief in craft production, in the necessity of skilled labor, in the impossibility of true mass production for complex machinery, is nearly universal among Japanese industrial managers in 1944. It is also completely wrong. But the plant manager has no way of knowing this, because he has never seen an American aircraft plant. He has never walked through Willow Run. He has never watched a B-24 fuselage move down an assembly line where each workstation performs one simple, repetitive task. He has never seen how standardization and interchangeable parts eliminate the need for hand-fitting. He cannot imagine what American industry has achieved because it is so far outside his frame of reference. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The visiting officers thank the plant manager and depart. In their report to Naval Headquarters, they note that Mitsubishi production appears to be at maximum sustainable capacity given available resources. They recommend against attempting to significantly expand Zero production and instead suggest focusing on kamikaze tactics that can make more effective use of available aircraft and less trained pilots. This recommendation is adopted. By the fall of 1944, significant numbers of Zeros are being reserved for suicide missions rather than conventional combat. Meanwhile, at Willow Run, production continues to accelerate. By August 1944, the plant is completing one B-24 every 59 minutes, an improvement over the previous 63-minute cycle. The bottleneck is no longer assembly. It is testing and flight preparation. Each completed bomber must undergo engine tests, systems checks, and a test flight before delivery. These final steps take longer than the actual assembly, and engineers are working to streamline them further. The human stories behind this production are as striking as the statistics. Rose Monroe, a riveter at Willow Run, becomes the face of American industrial mobilization after appearing in a promotional film about the plant. She is 29 years old, a widow with 2 children, and had never held a manufacturing job before the war. After 3 weeks of training, she is installing rivets on B-24 fuselages, working the night shift, and earning wages that allow her to support her family independently. Rose's story is repeated 42,000 times at Willow Run alone. The vast majority of workers have no prior experience in aircraft manufacturing. Many are women. Many are African American, hired into industrial jobs from which they were previously excluded. Many are teenagers, too young for military service, but old enough to work. They learn specific, repetitive tasks and perform them hour after hour, day after day, with a precision that rivals any craftsman. The contrast with Mitsubishi could hardly be more stark. The Nagoya plant employs approximately 2,000 workers, nearly all men, most with years of industrial experience. They build 15 Zeros per month. Willow Run employs 42,000 workers, more than half women, many with mere weeks of experience. They build 500 B-24s per month. The productivity difference is not 25-1, as the raw numbers might suggest. It is more complex than that, but the output difference is undeniable. In the time it takes Mitsubishi to complete 1 Zero, Willow Run completes approximately 33 B-24s. This disparity extends across the entire American aviation industry. By the fall of 1944, the United States operates 18 primary aircraft manufacturing plants producing heavy bombers, not including facilities building medium bombers, fighters, or other types. Each of these plants has adopted assembly line methods. Each employs thousands of workers. Each produces dozens or hundreds of aircraft per month. The combined output is staggering. In October 1944, American factories produced 9,513 military aircraft of all types. This single month exceeds Japan's total production for all of 1943. Japanese intelligence officers attempting to assess American production capability face a unique problem. The numbers they receive from various sources are so large that senior commanders refuse to believe them. When reports indicate that American factories produced over 96,000 aircraft in 1944, the figures are dismissed as propaganda or calculation errors. It is psychologically impossible for Japanese officers, educated in a system that emphasizes quality over quantity, craftsmanship over mass production, to accept that American industry operates on a scale dozens of times larger than their own. This denial persists even as evidence accumulates. By late 1944, American aircraft appear over Japan itself. B-29 Superfortress bombers, operating from bases in the Mariana Islands, begin a strategic bombing campaign against Japanese cities and industrial facilities. The B-29 is the most advanced bomber in the world, with a pressurized cabin, remote-controlled gun turrets, and the range to strike Japan from distant bases. It is also produced in substantial numbers. Boeing, Bell, and Martin together build over 3,900 B-29s during the war, with peak production reaching 350 per month in early 1945. On November 24, 1944, 111 B-29s strike the Nakajima aircraft plant in Tokyo. This is one of Japan's primary engine manufacturing facilities and a critical node in the production network. The raid destroys approximately 40% of the plant's productive capacity. Nakajima will continue operating, but output drops significantly. More raids follow. On December 3, 67 B-29s strike the Mitsubishi engine plant in Nagoya. On December 13, 90 B-29s return to the Mitsubishi plant, causing additional damage. The psychological impact of these raids extends beyond the physical destruction. Japanese factory workers, who have been told that American production figures are exaggerated, now watch as hundreds of American bombers appear over their cities in broad daylight. The bombers fly at altitudes that Japanese fighters struggle to reach. They operate in formations that overwhelm the limited air defenses, and they return again and again, demonstrating an industrial capacity that makes the official propaganda look absurd. In January 1945, a remarkable document surfaces in Japanese military planning circles. It is an analysis prepared by a junior officer in the Naval Technical Bureau. A man who has carefully studied all available intelligence on American aircraft production. His report attempts to calculate actual American output by triangulating multiple sources, captured documents, neutral observer reports, reconnaissance photographs of American airfields showing hundreds of aircraft, and back-calculating from the numbers of aircraft appearing in combat. His conclusion is that the United States produced approximately 100,000 aircraft in 1944. He shows his work, explains his methodology, and presents the figure not as propaganda, but as the best estimate available from fragmentary data. The report is forwarded up the chain of command with annotations from various officers. Most annotations are dismissive, clearly erroneous. Impossible figures. American disinformation. One senior officer writes simply, "If this were true, the war would already be lost." The report reaches Admiral Somu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet. Toyoda reads it carefully. He has access to information that junior officers do not, including reports from Japanese diplomatic personnel in neutral countries who have observed American industry firsthand. He knows the junior officer's estimate is approximately correct, and he knows exactly what it means. Toyoda calls a meeting of his senior staff and asks a simple question. If the Americans can build 100,000 aircraft in a year, how many can we build? The answers vary, but the consensus is approximately 28,000 aircraft of all types at maximum sustainable production. Toyoda does the mathematics, a 4-to-1 production ratio, with the American aircraft generally larger, better equipped, and more capable. He asks a second question. How do we fight a war against an enemy with 4 times our production capacity? The room is silent. No one has an answer, because there is no answer. Japan entered the war believing that morale and training could compensate for industrial disadvantages. January 1945. This belief has been tested to destruction. Morale cannot stop a B-29. Training cannot make a Zero competitive with an F-6F Hellcat when the Hellcat pilot has armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, and superior firepower. Spirit cannot overcome the mathematics of attrition when the enemy can replace losses 4 times faster than you can. Toyoda adjourns the meeting without issuing any new orders. What orders could he issue? Build more aircraft. The factories are already operating at maximum capacity. Train more pilots. There is insufficient fuel for adequate training, even for current pilot production. Fight more effectively. Japanese forces are fighting with desperate courage, and it is not enough. The strategic situation is hopeless, and has been hopeless since approximately mid-1943. But only now is this reality penetrating the highest levels of Japanese command. The final demonstration of the production disparity comes in the spring of 1945. On April 7, the battleship Yamato, the largest and most powerful battleship ever built, sails from Japan on a suicide mission to Okinawa. She carries enough fuel for a one-way trip and is expected to beach herself and fight as a stationary fortress. American reconnaissance aircraft detect Yamato shortly after she sails. Within hours, a strike force of more than 300 American carrier aircraft assembles and attacks. The battle is brief and one-sided. Yamato, designed to fight other battleships with her massive 18-inch guns, is helpless against massed air attack. American bombers and torpedo planes strike from multiple directions. Within 2 hours, Yamato capsizes and sinks, taking more than 3,000 crew with her. American losses: 10 aircraft. The great battleship, which took 5 years to build and represented the pinnacle of Japanese naval engineering, is destroyed in an afternoon by aircraft that American factories produce in less than 2 days. The symbolism is difficult to miss. Yamato represents the old paradigm of naval warfare, massive individual units of overwhelming power. The American aircraft represent the new paradigm, numerous, expendable, and overwhelming through coordinated mass action. Japan bet on quality, America bet on quantity, and in total war, quantity has its own quality. On August 6, 1945, a single B-29, Enola Gay, drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another B-29, Boxcar, drops a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. These attacks introduce a weapon of unprecedented destructive power and render all previous calculations about air warfare obsolete. But even without the atomic bombs, Japan's defeat was inevitable. American industrial production had already decided the war. The atomic bombs simply accelerated the end. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast. Among the reasons he cites is the enemy's use of a cruel new bomb. But he also mentions that the war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage, a profound understatement describing 3.5 years of industrial and military defeat. After the war, American occupation forces conduct extensive surveys of Japanese industry. Teams of engineers and economists examine aircraft plants, interview managers and workers, and analyze production records. Their findings confirm what the wartime intelligence suggested. Japanese aircraft production in 1944 totaled 28,180 aircraft. American production the same year totaled 96,318 aircraft. The ratio was 3.4 to 1, almost exactly what Admiral Toyoda calculated in his January 1945 meeting. But the raw numbers tell only part of the story. American aircraft were, on average, significantly larger and more capable than Japanese equivalents. A B-24 bomber represented approximately 6 times the industrial effort of a Zero fighter. An F-6F Hellcat, with its armor and self-sealing tanks, represented approximately 3 times the industrial effort of a Zero. Adjusting for aircraft capability, the effective production ratio was closer to 7 or 8 to 1. The occupation teams also examined Japanese production methods in detail. They find that Japanese aircraft manufacturing in 1944 resembles American aircraft manufacturing circa 1938. Substantial hand-fitting of components, limited standardization, heavy reliance on skilled labor, sequential assembly rather than parallel assembly of subcomponents. These methods produce excellent aircraft when time and resources are unlimited, but they cannot scale to mass production under wartime constraints. One American engineer, after touring the Mitsubishi Nagoya plant, writes in his report, "The Japanese were not defeated by superior American technology or superior American tactics. They were defeated by superior American industrial organization. They brought craftsmen to a factory fight." This assessment, while somewhat glib, captures an essential truth. The Zero was in many ways an excellent aircraft when introduced. Japanese pilots were superbly trained. Japanese tactics were effective. But none of this mattered when American industry could produce 4 times as many aircraft, train 4 times as many pilots, and sustain a level of combat operations that simply ground Japanese air power into dust through relentless attrition. The Mitsubishi plant that Japanese officers toured in 1943 continues operating after the war, converting to civilian production. The assembly halls that once built Zeros now build automobiles, heavy machinery, and later, civilian aircraft. Japan's post-war economic miracle is built in part on the industrial base developed during the war, but with crucial modifications learned from observing American methods. Japanese industry, after 1945, embraces standardization, mass production, and quality control systems that make post-war Japanese manufacturing globally competitive. The Willow Run plant operates until 1945, producing B-24s until the war's end. The final B-24 rolls off the line in June 1945, bringing total production at that single facility to 8,685 aircraft. After the war, the plant is sold to Kaiser Motors, then General Motors, and eventually becomes part of a larger industrial complex. The main assembly building still stands, now serving as a storage and logistics facility, a cathedral of industrial production slowly being reclaimed for modern purposes, but the lessons of the production race endure. The Pacific War demonstrated conclusively that modern warfare is not decided primarily on the battlefield. It is decided in the factories, the shipyards, the training facilities, and the resource extraction industries that feed the military machine. A nation can have the finest soldiers, the best training, and superior tactics, but if it cannot produce enough weapons, enough ammunition, enough fuel, and enough replacement personnel, it will lose a war of attrition against an enemy with superior industrial capacity. Japan's leaders understood this intellectually. They knew from the beginning that a prolonged war against the United States would be difficult, but they did not truly comprehend the scale of American industrial power until it was far too late. The 15 Zeros under construction at Mitsubishi seemed adequate in the context of Japanese industrial experience. They were not adequate in the context of global total war against an opponent building 500 bombers per month at a single plant. The final irony is that Japanese officers touring the Mitsubishi plant in 1943 and 44 were seeing exactly what they expected to see. Skilled craftsmen carefully assembling aircraft of excellent quality using methods refined over years of experience. What they could not see, because it was beyond their frame of reference, was that halfway around the world, American workers with 3 weeks of training were assembling bombers on a moving line with a precision and speed that made Japanese production methods obsolete. By the time Japanese commanders understood what they were facing, understood that American production was not propaganda but reality, understood that the war was being lost in the factories long before it was lost on the battlefields, it was too late to change course. The mathematics of industrial production are merciless. You cannot handcraft your way to victory against an opponent who has mastered mass production. Japan learned this lesson at catastrophic cost when the last Zero rolled off the Mitsubishi production line in August 1945. Total production had reached approximately 10,430 aircraft over 5 years, a remarkable achievement by pre-war standards, representing thousands of hours of skilled labor, but utterly inadequate for the war Japan chose to fight. In the same 5 years, American factories produced over 144,000 fighters and over 97,000 bombers. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Japan built 10,000 Zeros. America built 241,000 fighters and bombers. The officers who toured Mitsubishi and saw 15 Zeros under construction were looking at the total monthly output of Japan's most important fighter production facility. They thought they were seeing a war effort at maximum capacity. They were correct, but maximum capacity was not nearly enough. While they walked through those assembly halls on the other side of the world, Henry Ford's assembly line was producing more heavy bombers in a single week than Mitsubishi produced Zeros in a month. That disparity, more than any battle, any tactic, or any weapon, decided the Pacific War. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.